So I grew up in Denver, Colorado. The earliest memories that I have are going to be circled around my grandparents, which is in the Park Hill neighborhood, 80207. We grew up in that area, and there were always kids around. So I'm actually one of many grandchildren that my grandparents had. So they had a total of 14 kids. 13 of them are still alive today. Of those kids, there's hundreds of us, so from the Montoya family. And so over at Grandma and Grandpa's house, we had several cousins that were just around in the neighborhood. And I grew up as an only child, but I never knew it, if that makes any sense. Because my cousins, I had three female cousins that were always at the house. I had three male cousins that were always at the house, and we were always doing something with Grandpa and Grandma. So when I was a kid coming up, I didn't notice anything that was different. We had dogs that would run loose, that we would get chased by occasionally. We learned real quick how to throw rocks at those dogs if they were coming at us, pretend to pick up sticks even if there wasn't around. There was, as I matured and got older, I realized that it was a high crime area. I didn't know that though when I was a kid. So it was quite often in the Stapleton area. Now is what they call it. It was Stapleton Airport. It was just Park Hill. We had planes that would fly over all time of the day and night, and we would have red, white, and blue, police lights going off throughout the day and throughout the night. And occasionally you'd see people hopping fences, and sometimes you'd hear dogs bark. So quite often it was an area full of energy. For me, it was real positive coming up as a kid, because at home I had my grandparents. My mom, of course, was a huge part of that, but she was working, and essentially she was working solo. So in the early 90s, we had the Summer of Violence, and I think Denver Post reported that 1993 was probably one of the most violent areas. We had quite a few people. I'm gonna take a limb, jump out on a limb, and say there was at least 300 people that got involved with some type of gun violence. And you had, I'm gonna say, close to, if not more than 60 people that died because of that. And a lot of it came down to gangs. And so a lot of my friends were gang members. I was approached as a kid to be a gang member, be it a Sureño or Norteño, a Blood or a Crip. These were my homeboys. These were the guys that I grew up with. And they were my neighbors and they were my friends coming up through elementary school and middle school. And I didn't know anything was different about them or even us. I thought it was thought it was normal when a car slowed down and rolled down its window that you just ran so you wouldn't get shot. I thought that was a normal thing. So what ended up happening was my friends, they had moved out from California, so their brother had got shot and he died. He was a Sureño. And so they were individuals that ended up getting involved into, I guess you could say, the gang culture and the gang lifestyle. And they said, "Hey, Mateo, ¿quieres jugar? You want to play baseball?" And I was like, "Let's do this, man," because I wanted to be with my boys and I wanted to hang out. And at that time, the police athletic league was huge out here in Colorado as far as the impact that it had. So there was a lot of positives. And a lot of these guys were police officers, these coaches, right? And you don't see that as much today, but looking back at that time, this is where things started to kind of change for me, because I remember they told me, they said, "Mateo, go out to left field." I ain't never been on a field, so I didn't know where. I went to what we would call shortstop, and they said, "Nah, man, you gotta go deeper than that." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they were like, "Left field is out there." And I didn't know, even what it was. I didn't know anything about baseball. And slowly the coaches, they started to work with me, and I got the opportunity, because of what was going on in society at that time. There was a guy by the name of Bo Calloway, and he put together a group of coaches that included major league coaches, that included professional baseball players, former baseball players. At the time, the Rockies were out there. And what he ended up doing was, with that, he put together a baseball camp for inner city kids. And with those inner city kids, what was really cool is we had kids from Pittsburgh, we had kids from the Bronx, New York, we had kids from Cincinnati, Ohio, we had kids from Dallas, Texas, from Austin, Texas, Oakland, California, hood kids. And I didn't know I was a hood kid. I had no idea I was a hood kid. I thought I was just a normal kid. And I was, for the hood. And we were kids with a little bit of talent, and they wanted to gear us into baseball. So for that time frame, it would have been 93 and 94, they had a 3-week camp at Regis High School. And from 0700 to about 1700, we ate and drank baseball. People didn't really like police officers. And I'm not gonna say I really did either, because I didn't know these guys. And so I remember getting bumped up a couple times, and they were just doing their job. But I happened to match descriptions of individuals that were in the neighborhood doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. And during that time frame, when we would see the police, because we knew we weren't doing anything incorrect, we weren't too concerned about stuff. But that doesn't mean that you wanted to deal with, the interaction or the context of even seeing them, because the good ones, they came up and they would talk to you, and they weren't trying to, to really get you jammed up. They saw you as a kid, they saw you as a human, and be they white, be they black, be they Latino police officers, they interacted appropriately. But I ran across a few where they weren't so kind, and they weren't the best to deal with when it came to that interaction. And I remember that interaction. I remember them calling me out of my name. I was a juvenile, and they did everything they could to try and verbally put me in a situation that maybe wasn't the most pleasant, but they didn't know who I was either. And so, but I knew that that was something that made an impact on me. And so I could say within the neighborhood, within Park Hill, we knew the good officers, and we knew the ones that we didn't want to deal with because of the way that they would interact. But those ones, they weren't always around. The good ones were around, and the good ones, they made their presence known the right way. They were polite. They got to know our names, whether or not it was just work related or whether or not it was them just trying to put a good face on a position of trust. But they got to know us, and they got to talk to us, and they encouraged us. And I remember I had one, and when he pulled me aside, because I've been cuffed up by the police, I've been in the back of a patrol car, they talked to me, and they talked to my friends, and they encouraged us the right way, and they said that we had potential. And so that, coupled with other peace officers, be they coaches, be they friends that we saw through the PAL, Police Athletic League, they took that change of appropriateness, and they applied it, and I think it affected me positively, because I didn't have as much fear or concern. There were times though where it was, for me, I was like, why is this guy being so aggressive? Why is this guy being so hard? Like, you don't know me. Like, you don't know my intent. You don't have to come at me like that. Just ask nicely, and I'll do what you ask. And my friends, a lot of them, they took offense to some of that. And those, like I said, those friends, they ended up going down a road that I would later see them not as successful. So I think it was a combination of a couple things. It was the intent of the peace officer. It was also the intent of the citizen to interpret the information that individual was providing during the contact. And in a lot of ways, it kind of it shaped the interaction and the life of us, the boys from the hood, I guess you could say. I met a guy, and this guy, big burly man, came up, "What you do for work, boy?" And when he asked me that, I was like, "What you talking about?" And he said, what do you think about 4 days on, 3 days off? And he sold me on a career that, with his personality and the way that he approached me, that put me on a path that I'm currently on. And I'm very grateful, and I'm humbled to have that opportunity. So this is where I became a peace officer. And I started as a civilian at Arapahoe County. And you know, I was still training for track and field. And I was still learning a whole lot of stuff that, you know, now has become, in a sense, second nature. But it's taken a lot of years and a lot of reps to get there. But it really circled around that whole athletics thing, and it circled around people from all nationalities that actually really took a liking to me. But this particular person that got me into law enforcement, he was African American. And he was doing it for the right reason, and I think that he saw that there was a quality that I hopefully bring, and I try to every single day, which is you know, a positivity. And so that's where I'm at. As a civilian at the sheriff's office, I saw some of my buddies, and I saw them on the other side. And I know a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people, and I joke a lot, and you know, I'm generally well-tempered when it comes to dealing with people. But then I saw these are my friends, and they were excited to see me as a civilian working at a sheriff's office. And it struck me strange, because I felt like my life had gone down the wrong, I'm gonna be real with you, I thought my life had gone down the wrong road, because I was supposed to be a Major League Baseball player, man. Like, that's what I was known. I was known as somebody who was probably going to play baseball and do very well at it. And I had a lot of skill. I was raw in a lot of ways, looking back at it, and I had some good coaching that got me really far. But I almost felt at that time that what I had done, I was like, oh, you know, I'll work at a government, you know, position, I guess, you know, until something better pops up, right? Well, when I started seeing the kids that I grew up with on the other side wearing an orange and blue jumpsuit and looking at years and possibly prison sentences, you know, they encouraged me the right way, as did the coworkers that I worked with that were peace officers. And they said, man, we're proud of you. And I didn't understand that from that standpoint. So I actually had friends that were incarcerated asking me to do it the right way continually and to keep pushing. And I didn't get it. And then that's when I had a sergeant, we'll call him Mac, Sergeant Mac. He got in my face, and he said, when you putting in? I was like, I'm not trying to be a cop. Look at you, all crusty and, you know, grumpy and hating the world. And of course, he knew I was joking. And then I had my partner G, who was a peace officer. He put his big old hands behind me, and he said, you're gonna put in. And then I had my other friend Craig, who's a peace officer. And Craig's about 6'9", 6'10", was a former USC basketball player, star. He said, you're putting in. I was like, nah, man, I'm not putting in. I'm not trying to look like you guys. And so in a nice way, they pressured me into doing it. And they said, we're gonna kick your tail if you don't. Of course, they use different choice words. And I put in. And you know, when I put in for the academy, I felt a heavy weight of responsibility to do my best and to represent essentially where I came from, but also the people that put a lot of trust in me. As far as the effect of seeing the disproportionate amount of individuals that were actually peace officers, and then the individuals that were incarcerated, mentally it affected me because of the fact that I saw that there was a gap. There was a big gaping hole of potential that I wanted to make sure that I filled that void. Because I've been on the other side where you're looked at a certain way because you're driving a type of vehicle, you're walking in a neighborhood, and you're viewed to be some type of person that maybe you're not on the right road, but you're not on the wrong road. You're just in your neighborhood, like literally. You're just in your neighborhood. And so I've seen how that has affected, you know, us. And like I said, I grew up, you know, seeing, you know, Rodney King, Can't We All Just Get Along? You know, just all the little things that we saw growing up. And then now here I am, a state certified peace officer, something that I had literally no aspirations to do when I was a child. But it was almost like the different schools I had gone to, the people that I had interacted with, the different sports I played. It kind of geared me to not only understand, so I wasn't as intimidated with these individuals because I heard their tone. I heard their cry, I guess you could say. I heard their verbiage. I heard their intent. Just because somebody's yelling doesn't mean that they're going to be violent. Sometimes it means that they're just angry. Just because somebody's, now if they say they're going to go get a weapon, then that changes things differently. But from that standpoint, you have sometimes people, and especially in different cultures, we're emotional and we handle things differently. And so for me, it really it opened my eyes that I would walk in there and I'd say, look, man, I understand you're upset. I get you're upset, okay? But you have to understand the position you're in. You're not in a position where you're not only going to win, but you're going to lose your temperament. You're going to lose the opportunity to actually voice what's really going on in your heart and in your head. And you know, that's where these individuals that weren't aware of that tone, because they didn't play sports, so they didn't know what it was like to get yelled at when they, you know, ran a route wrong, you know, by a minority coach. They don't know what that's like. Or they didn't know what it was like to, you know, miss a tackle or strike out and then have that emotion and then let it loose and then bring it back in. Like they didn't know all these different things. And so a lot of times I correlated with all the emotions that I had seen throughout the athletics and throughout growing up in Park Hill and through just things, just conversation. And so I saw that me staying in the profession could possibly fill that void and fill that gap. And so I had individuals that they looked at the way that I handled things differently. Not right, not wrong, but just differently than maybe they would. At the county, I could literally count five people that I could see of color, be they black or of African descent. I could also count 5 Latino officers that I could recall when I first started. And I don't know how big the department was at that time, and it's not that the numbers aren't really the focus of the disproportion when it comes to the equality aspect. But it was something that I noticed. And because it was something that I noticed, I'm not oblivious to other people noticing it. And so I stood out for a few reasons. And, you know, being now in that position, we're going to say 15 years later, because that's where I'm at in my career, it's equaled out, and we've progressed. So I want to make sure that's understood too. We've progressed every year. It's gotten a little bit better and a little bit more balanced. But there are still those tensions. And my kids are mixed. And by mixed, they are of African descent. And a lot of people don't know that. And the reason why they don't know that is because when they look at me, they assume. And we have other officers that have that same connection where their children are mixed. And so for a citizen to assume that there is a bias that's already in a person, that's a bias in itself. And that's something it weighs heavy. I've had people come up to me and they've told me straight up that I should not be a peace officer because I got black kids. They said this to me. And, you know, I think back to prior to me having kids, the whole purpose of me joining was because my black friends, my Mexican friends, my Latino friends, my Chinese friends, whatever type of friends that I had, my white friends, they were happy that I was putting in because I brought a certain connection to the position that maybe they didn't see in others. And so for me, it turned into one of those kind of things where I guess you could say it became a more personal and a heavier weight. And so there have been times for me where it's been extremely difficult because, you know, I shouldn't have to explain to people that I've got mixed kids and that's why I'm treating you right. I'm treating you right because you deserve to be treated right. But that's something that a lot of people forget because they assume. And like I said, for my partners that have that same scenario going on in their family home, that they show up every day, they put on a vest, and they make a decision to do everything they can willingly you're not gonna be a millionaire, you know, being a peace officer. I'm gonna be real with you. So your amount of power that you have, you know, it's granted to you through the state, it's granted through the municipality that you work for or the government that you work for. You don't walk in there thinking you're King Kong. Some people might, but like I said, for my teammates, they don't. They walk in there wanting to help, and they walk in there with the right heart and the right spirit. But for me, it's been difficult because in a lot of ways I've had to defend the concept that all cops are bad, because they don't know. You know, these people don't know. They have this mindset that, you know, that because you put on a badge that you're out to get them. I'm not out to get you. You know, I'd love a day where I could just eat donuts and drink milk all day. You know, I would love that. Write that down, right? The truth of the matter is that, you know, we're not in that situation. We have to, and a lot of times, engage in enforcement situations because somebody commits a crime and they violate somebody's rights. And it's a hard-pressed thing to continue to go through a day-to-day basis where you're disliked simply because you exist. The concept of having a peace officer is similar to having a fire department. We would love for there to not be any fires here in the state of Colorado, but we have fires, and that's why we hire firemen. We would love for there to be no violence and no crime across the U.S. And there are days where citizens have bad days and they violate people's rights, and we have to go into that situation where that enforcement requires certain things. And it really comes back down to, you had mentioned George Floyd. So I actually had a conversation with my son, and one of the things that he said, "Dad," he said, "I'm a black man and you're a police officer. Can you talk to me about a black man getting killed by a police officer?" And so I had that conversation with him, and I explained to him as best I could, which is the voice of oppression and the thumbprint that oppression and the print that it leaves on society isn't always, you know, with violence. It's not always a gun or a knife. A lot of times what it is it's the choice to remove the help. It's the choice to remove the opportunity to provide the security and the I guess you could say the sacredness of the position is you are providing in some way peace to society. And I think a lot of people, they misconstrue those situations where it's very, very difficult, because we deal with people on the worst days of their lives a lot of times. A lot of these people, you know, that we deal with, they are not having the best day, and that's why they call, or that's why we are called. I think quite often what's missed and what's lost in translation is I have the opportunity to not be in the profession, yet I choose to. And I also have the opportunity to, within the profession, provide the best service and the quality that I would want. And so I think quite often to that officer, when I was 10, 11, 12 years of age, prior to me getting involved in sports, that was doing his job, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Son, you got potential." And I think and I hope in the back of my mind that on that day that I show up to work, that I might be so fortunate to impact somebody positively that way. So, you know, I know that it could be my last day. We have officers that die in several ways in the line of duty, and none of them are ideal. You never want to go out that way. It's a loss to the community, it's a loss to the family, and it's not always a good thing just in general. You know, people passing away is not a fun thing to deal with. And that's another thing too, is I think quite often, you know, to those calls for service that I go to, where we find somebody that is no longer with us, and then we make the phone call to the family. And you know, those are also moments where you want to provide that best service, I guess you could say, or that best opportunity to encourage people that we're going to get through it as a community, and we're going to make a positive impact, and we're going to get through this together. So my biggest thing that gets me up in the morning, that pushes me every day, it's my 2 kids. It's the kid that I haven't interacted with, and it's the family that hopefully I can make a positive impact on and really help them have a better day.